What are you doing, mage? Go turn in. Go. Over there. Over there. Come on. There we go. There we go. Okay. Excellent. So let's cover what you want, why you want it, what order you want it in, who's going to be contesting us for the loot, and what the best loot pieces are, and much more. So let's get into the loot prio for rogues in phase 6. Let's go. By the way guys, I've barely slept for the last week. I've been staring at spreadsheets and sim sheets for the last week doing this guide. So if you could subscribe, that would mean the world to me. And of course, if you want to help support anything I do, you can check out these sweet hoodies below in the description, and that helps support the channel as well. Thank you. Alright guys, so as always with any of these long super guides that I make, the link is in the description below if you want this text guide that we're going through. We cover everything from biskless items to individual trinket usages to all the Bonescythe armor information for tier 3, all the mats that you need to know. I go through every single piece of gear and sim it versus previous gear so that you know how much DPS you gain or lose. Everything's sorted out into nice slots and easy to use prios, and then I also go over what the best weapons and items are to prio first. So this is tier 3. I think it actually looks pretty good. I really like the look of tier 3. I think it's nice that we're moving away from the clown suit sets that we've been using in the past, and it has some pretty nice set bonuses. So you can see here the 2-piece bonus for tier 3 is a healing. So this is similar to how like tier 2 heals you, except it's not quite as much obviously. So each proc is 90 to 110. The 4-piece gives you energy back every time you crit, which is huge. The 6-piece reduces the threat of your backstab, sinister strike, hemorrhage, and eviscerate. So that's kind of it's nice, but it's not major. Now the 8-piece bonus is kind of interesting because for every combo point that you have when you eviscerate, it gives you a 5% chance, so that's 25% chance at 5 combo points, to get 100% crit rate on your next backstab, sinister strike, or hemorrhage. Now the main bonus that everyone's looking forward to is of course the 4-piece bonus, because energy is always massive. Anytime we can get back energy for doing something as a rogue, it's usually a gigantic DPS boost for us. So the 4-piece is really the best part of this Bonescythe armor. Now the interesting thing about this Bonescythe armor is that it is 9 pieces. So even though it's an 8-set bonus, there's 9 pieces of Bonescythe. So this means you actually don't need all 9 pieces of Bonescythe, which is kind of neat. So the first question you should ask is, should you use all 9 pieces of tier 3? And the answer for a lot of people is no. Now because you only need 8 out of 9 pieces to get the 8 bonus, it's possible to start swapping out pieces. You don't actually need to use the full tier 3 set. So you can see here, you can swap in the Belt of Never Ending Agony here, for example, for the tier 3 belt. And on Horde side in particular, the tier 3 belt is worse than the Belt of Never Ending Agony. Now another swap that you can actually do is the Death Dealer's Vest. Now tier 2.5 actually scales better than tier 3 does, because the tier 3 set is very attack bonus focused, and on the Alliance side in particular with the ZG and the Paladin stat buff, the tier 2.5 chest actually gives more DPS with world buffs than the tier 3 set does on the Alliance side. So that's another possible swap that some rogues are going to be doing. Now here are the rough DPS numbers if you are curious for swapping these items out. So if you are Horde rogue and you swap out the belt, so you're going to see a 3 to 4 DPS increase using 8 out of 9 tier 3 with the Cthulhu belt. Now if you're on the Lance side on the other hand and you swap out the Cthulhu belt, you're actually going to get a DPS decrease if you try to swap in the Cthulhu belt for the tier 3 belt, because on the Lance side again you guys have the ZG and the Paladin buff stacking on top. So when you're world buffed, the tier 3 belt is actually better than the Cthulhu belt by just a tiny little bit. Now the swap you do want to do is the chest swap as an Alliance rogue. So as an Alliance rogue, and mainly we're talking about sword rogues in particular, and I'll explain why only sword rogues on the Alliance side later in this guide, but basically if you swap it out as a sword rogue on Alliance side, you're going to get 3 to 4 DPS increase by using 8 out of 9 tier 3 and the tier 2.5 chest. Now, the next thing you need to be worried about is rogue crit cap. So if you remember, for those of us who played during Blackwing Lair and going into Blackwing Lair, rogue crit cap was a real issue. Now what this means is I'm talking about the crit cap on your auto attacks. So once you hit a certain number of crit, anything beyond that is completely wasted. It doesn't even count. So that means if you're at the crit cap and you're getting more crit, so let's say your crit cap is 50% and you're getting 53%, the extra 3% is doing nothing for you, and that's just wasted stats. So Rogue's actually going to start to running into this issue once again in phase 6. Now, if you don't already know, 1% hit equals 1% more crit cap, so hit is going to play a key role in your gearing in phase 6. Now the interesting thing is Alliance Dagger Rogues in particular. If you are an Alliance Dagger Rogue, you are into a world of pain for crit cap issues coming up. So I actually played around with it. If you actually take all the BIS upgrades possible and you go nuts on buffs, consumables, and every potential upgrade that you can get, you can actually end up 8% over crit cap in some situations, which is a massive number. So you can't just blindly go into phase 6 picking up every single BIS piece, because it's actually going to end up with you crit capping and you end up doing less DPS than you actually could with swapping some gear in and out. For example, one piece that we can talk about is the crossbow. So this is the crossbow from KT. It drops off the last boss in phase 6. On paper, this is a DPS increase. It's 1% crit, 24 attack power. It's a very good bow. On paper, it's the BIS item for rogues in range slot in the game. But because of the crit cap, a lot of rogues won't actually want this. If you actually use this, you're going to get less DPS than the Striker's Mark if you are crit capped. Okay, now if you're not already using one of these two weak auras, I highly recommend you use them. So these are weak auras made by one of our guys in our Discord called Red Tux. He makes the Red Tux UI. He's a baller with UI stuff. And he made these two weak auras to help you track your crit cap. So one of them tracks your crit cap on your character stat screen, and the other one tracks it just anywhere on the screen that you want. So you can pick which one you want, both do the same thing, and I recommend you grab one of these in phase 6 because you need to be aware of your crit cap in phase 6. Now next, is tier 3 plus 4-piece Darkmantle a thing? So I've been getting a lot of questions about this. So some rogues are thinking about mixing 4-piece tier 3 with 4-piece Darkmantle and trying to get the best of both worlds. And the answer is not really. You shouldn't really do this. So you can play around with mixing in pieces of Darkmantle in, but when we're talking about full tier 3 versus swapping in some Darkmantle, so 4-piece Darkmantle to get the energy proc, you actually end up with 20 to 50 DPS lust. So it's not worth at all really considering doing this mix of Darkmantle and tier 3. It's really not something that anyone's going to be doing. Now, where you can situationally possibly use Darkmantle is as you're transitioning from 2.5 to tier 3. So if you want, this is going to be personal preference. You can try to swap in some Darkmantle while you're breaking your tier 2.5 set. But just keep in mind that the raw stats on 2.5 are actually great. You don't have to swap in Darkmantle at all. Just running straight mixed clown set with 2.5 and whatever pieces you gear up for in phase 6. So if you pick up some pieces and have to break your tier 2.5, that's perfectly okay. Just the raw stats alone on the 2.5 is actually worth wearing. So if you do want to swap in Darkmantle, that's fine, but you absolutely do not need to. It's going to be a personal preference of whether you want the consistency of tier 2.5 / tier 3, or you want to go for the lucky RNG of Darkmantle. Now again, once you are in full BIS or in full tier 3, you do not want to be really using Darkmantle. It's just too much DPS loss on average. It's minus 20 to minus 50 DPS lost. So unless you get some god mode Darkmantle proc rate on one fight, which can happen, admittedly it can happen, it's probably not going to beat full tier 3. Okay, next, how hard is it to get tier 3? So what crafted mats do you need? So these are the crafted mats if you don't already know what you need. So these war-torn leather scraps I just dropped from Naxx Trash. So your guild will get a whole bunch of these. You do need to make sure you have these prepared. So 5 Arcanite bars, 42 cured rugged hides, 5 Nexus crystals, and 275 gold. Okay, so if you want to craft a full set of tier 3, that's what you're going to need. And by the way, if you haven't been collecting your cured rugged hides, you really need to get on that, because the prices of cured rugged hide and anything to make them have been skyrocketing like crazy. So you should get on that before the phase starts and gets announced, because then it's going to only go even higher. Okay, now tier 3 comes with loot tokens. So much like tier 2.5, we get these tokens here and they're shared, but luckily we only share them with warriors this time. So warriors are the only other class that shares our class tokens. However, the downside here is that unlike 2.5, these Naxxramas loot tokens are not guaranteed. Okay, so the loot tokens are guaranteed to drop, but we don't know what type they'll be. So what I mean by here is, you can see down here, I've got an entire list on this guide. You can see each boss will be set to drop a certain piece of token, but the type of token is completely random. It could be the warrior and rogue token, it could be the mage token, for example. It could be any of the tokens possible. There's 3 types of tokens, so there's no guarantee that it's going to be the warrior and rogue type. All that's guaranteed is that it will be a shoulder token of some sort will drop from Patchwork. Now, as far as the drop rates, each of the bosses in each wing drops 1 token, except for the last boss of each wing, which drops 2 pieces. So you can see here for each quarter and each wing, it's 1 piece of each boss, and then the last boss always drops 2 pieces of tier 3. Now, as far as the rings drop off the final boss, so 2 rings drop off Kel'Thuzad every single kill. So even though it's not guaranteed to always be a warrior and rogue drop every time it drops, you can see the tier 3 is going to be really common, and we only share it with 1 other class. Alright, so it's not going to be too bad. Now the big question is, do we fight warriors for tier 3 tokens? And the answer is both yes and kind of mostly no, actually. So here's the thing with the tokens, is that the warriors don't actually want it. The DPS warriors don't want it, the tanks don't really want it for the most part. And the only reason you might actually consider getting this is because the tier 3 4 set reduces the chance to miss taunt by 5%. And this is useful for the 4 horseman fight in Naxxramas. Now, here's the thing though. The 4 set bonus is mostly not needed if your guild has this item here. So this Nat Pago's Broken Reel from ZG. Most guilds should have been farming this for your warriors. If not, you guys should really be getting on that. All your warriors that are going to be tanking in the 4 horseman fight should have this reel ready. And it increases your chance to hit spells by 10%. And taunt counts as a spell. So this is really good. And once you combine this broken reel with backup warriors, for example, it's basically really low chance that you are going to miss taunt so many times that your raid's actually going to wipe. So that old thing where people were thinking that you needed this 4-piece set from tier 3 for the warriors in order to get the 100% chance that you definitely won't miss, it's not really needed. Guilds are going to plow through 4 horsemen as long as they have this. It drops the chance of you missing taunt to such a ridiculously low level that it's really a non-factor. It's actually becoming overkill to think about needing the 4 set bonus at this stage. And don't forget that classic kill times and kill speeds and difficulties have been going down. People are a lot better at killing mobs now, and kills are happening way faster. It's basically at the stage where the warrior faucet is no longer a must-have. You really don't need it. It's not a big deal. So to answer the question of are warriors interested in the tier 3, not really, and they don't really need it. The only thing that maybe some tanks might be interested in is the braces. So these braces are actually pretty decent braces, but even that's kind of it's not really a massive thing for them. They're not really drooling to pick up these braces or anything like that. So for the most part, if your guild has already farmed these for all the warriors, they don't really need the tier 3 set. It's a non-factor. So basically this means we don't share the tier 3 pieces with anyone in a large majority of cases, assuming your guild has been prepared appropriately. Now, moving on, let's talk about the actual tier 3 DPS breakdown versus tier 2.5 / phase 5 gear. So let's start with the helmet. So this is the helmet. It is actually a 8 to 10 DPS increase, so it's actually one of the better pieces versus tier 2.5. We have the shoulders here. The shoulders are an 8 to 10 DPS increase as well, so again these shoulders are pretty good. The chest is actually an interesting one because notice the chest here is heavily attack power focused, right? 80 attack power, there's no other actual stats on it. So because of this, it actually means that Alliance see a DPS loss for using the tier 3 chest over tier 2.5. And Horde actually see a DPS gain, but it's very, very little. It's 1 DPS gain basically for wearing this tier 3 chest. This is all because of the ZG and Paladin buff scaling on the Alliance side, and for Horde is the ZG buff alone. So just because of world buffs, if you're world buffed, this heavily attack focused bonus is not great because it doesn't scale. That said, Dagger rogues on Alliance and Dagger rogues in general are still gonna like this set because it helps them deal with the crit cap issues. So in this case, having such attack power focus is actually kind of good for them because it actually means that they end up with less crit than they end up with the tier 2.5 set. Okay, now the wrist pieces. The wrist pieces are pretty decent. They're kind of a middle of the pack gain. So you can see on Alliance it's a 4 to 6 DPS gain. For Horde it's a 3 to 5 DPS gain versus the QEBs. So again, this is practically the same as the Bloodfang braces. So if you don't have QEBs from AQ, you can think of these as Bloodfang braces as well, because Bloodfang braces are essentially like a half DPS within of the QEB braces. So not bad, kind of a middle of the pack item, the Bonescythe braces. Now the gloves are again another attack focused item. So you notice anytime we have a heavy attack focused piece of tier, is going to mimic. You're going to see that Alliance get less DPS gain from it. So you can see Alliance here only get 3 to 4 DPS gain versus Gloves of Enforcement, and Horde get 7 to 8 DPS gain versus that. So it's almost double the DPS gain on Horde side, just because Horde side doesn't deal with Paladin buff on top of the ZG buff. Okay, now the belt. The belt is actually kind of crummy. A lot of people aren't going to really care that much about the belt. So the belt on the Alliance side is 1 to 2 DPS gain, and it's actually a DPS loss on Horde side because Horde has the Cthulhu belt, which performs really, really well. So Horde won't even care about the belt. Horde they don't even want the belt, and Alliance barely care about the belt. It's a 1 to 2 DPS gain. So this belt is pretty mediocre, is going to be unwanted pretty quickly. Now the legs are pretty decent. They're a pretty decent piece. 8 to 10 DPS gain versus tier 2.5. So these are again one of the better pieces of tier 3. The feet are another attack focused item. So like the last attack focused item, you're gonna see 3 to 4 DPS gain versus tier 2.5 on the Alliance side, and basically double that, 6 to 8 DPS gain versus tier 2.5 on the Horde side. So still decent though, still a kind of a middle of the pack upgrade. Now next we have the finger, so the Bonescythe ring. So this ring actually drops from KT, and unlike the other pieces which drop as tokens, these rings actually just drop as the ring itself. So there's no turn-ins, there's no crafting or anything like that. It literally just drops as a Bonescythe ring of KT. Now the ring is actually pretty decent on the Alliance side. So versus a Band of Akura, for example, it's 5 to 6 DPS gain. Versus a Band of Akura on Horde side, it's a little bit less, but not the worst. It's 2 to 4 DPS gain. Now obviously this will depend on what ring you're replacing and such, but yeah, it's kind of a middle of the pack-ish item, the Bonescythe ring. But it's actually the rarest piece, because since these rings are not dropping as a token, there's 1 ring for every single class, which means there's 8 potential rings that can drop, which means these Bonescythe rings are actually the rarest piece out of all the Bonescythe pieces that you can get. Alright, so moving on, I do have it in the text guides where I kind of roughly go through which pieces give you the highest DPS gain for Horde side, and then which pieces give you the highest DPS gain for Alliance side as well, if you care about prioring the pieces. Now again, remember that these pieces are random. You're not guaranteed to get the rogue piece every single raid for any of these drops, so you might be at the mercy of RNG as to which pieces you pick up first when it comes to tier 3. Okay, now let's talk about the non-tier drops. Now this is gonna get a little bit interesting here, as well as I move into the actual BIS list for which pieces you want to combine together, because as I said, remember, crit cap is a real issue in phase 6, so you don't always necessarily want the on paper best piece of gear. Now firstly, let's cover the necklace. So here we have the Storm Rage's Talisman of Seething. So this is actually a DPS loss versus Presters with world buffs. So again, anything I cover here is always with simmed in a 90-second fight with full world buffs and consumables. That's how I tend to sim things. If you're not a rogue that world buffs or consumes, then just be aware that attack power bonuses tend to be a little bit better in those cases because world buffs scale with raw stats, typically. Okay, now, Storm Rage's Talisman of Seething. This is, as I said, a DPS loss, 4 to 5 DPS loss. No reason to ever take this. If anything, this would be really, really bad for most rogues to take because you can see it's 2% crit chance and attack power. This just basically pumps your crit up a whole bunch and doesn't give you raw stats. It's pretty bad. You don't want this necklace in general. So as long as you have a Prestes from Black Moon Lair, you're good. Don't even worry about the necklace dropping. Now the back. The back is an interesting one because on paper it's a DPS upgrade 1-to-1, but only on Horde side versus the Cloak of Concentrated Hatred. On the Lance side, it's actually a 0 DPS gain or a 1 DPS loss versus Cloak of the Fallen God when you have world buffs. Now this is because Cloak of the Fallen God has just really good raw stats that get boosted by the ZG and Paladin buff. So these are kind of in a weird spot. So even though they are DPS gain on Horde side, Horde don't necessarily all want them. And the reason for this is because obviously the Alliance don't care about it because it's worse than Cloak of the Fallen God, right? So it's worse than Cloak of the Fallen God for these Alliance guys when they're buffed. And even on Horde side, the Dagger rogues don't want it because it's crit focused. Look at the stats. It's 1% crit, 50 attack power. If you swap over from Cloak of Concentrated Hatred, which has hit on it instead of crit, you actually run into crit cap issues as a Dagger rogue. So Dagger rogues don't want the Shroud of Dominion at all. They can't really find a good usage for this unless they don't have world buffs. So overall, this back is pretty mediocre. No one really wants it. People might pick it up just for fun, but it's not really something that most rogues that are world buffed will care about at all. Now the finger is a great piece. The Band of Unnatural Forces that drops from Lothab is amazing. It's really, really good. It's one of the best pieces here. It's a 7 to 8 DPS gain for both sides. It's one of the best pieces in Naxxramas. You should absolutely be looking to pick up this ring. Now the trinkets. This is a little bit tricky, so we're going to talk about the trinkets as well as what chances you have of getting these trinkets. Now these trinket sims I did do in Simonize because Simonize, the spreadsheet I feel handles trinket sims a little bit better than Garcia, although the rest of the sims I did in Garcia. So the Kiss of the Spider is actually really, really good. It's the best trinket by far versus an Earth Strike for an example. It's a 30 plus DPS gain, so Kiss of the Spider is really, really, really good. It's basically the best trinket in the game. The best active trinket is Kiss of the Spider from Naxxramas. Now the problem with this trinket is that you are going to be fighting every single warrior. Okay, you're going to be fighting every single warrior because this trinket is really, really good for warriors. The attack speed scales really well with warriors, and every warrior wants this trinket as well. Now, the question is, should warriors automatically get this trinket? That's a question for your guild to decide. Personally, in hardcore guilds, I could absolutely see warriors getting this over the rogues for the really, really hardcore guilds, and then the rogues taking the other trinket instead. But in less hardcore guilds, it's actually common for rogues to outperform the warriors or be equal to the warriors in performance. So because the rogues in a lot of less hardcore guilds are outperforming the warriors, you wouldn't necessarily just auto prio this to the warrior just because they are warrior. I think individual performance in less hardcore guilds does matter there. So the loot prior for this is going to be kind of interesting. Everyone wants this trinket. It's technically a little bit better for warriors than it is for us. So how your guild distributes this is going to be an interesting one. Personally, I think it's going to be up to individual performance, unless you're in a hardcore guild where all your players are really, really good. Now, this goes kind of hand in hand with the second trinket that drops in Naxxramas. So the Slayer's Crest. 64 attack power, increases attack power. It's basically a better Earth Strike. It's a better Earth Strike. And versus an Earth Strike in a 90-second fight, it's a 20 to 23 DPS gain. So you can see here, this is a 20 to 23 DPS gain versus the Kiss of the Spider, which is an attack speed boost, which is a 30 DPS gain. So it is not as good as the Kiss of the Spider, but it's not that far behind. It's still a really, really good active trinket. And personally, I think it has better value for PvP, where the attack power gives you really nice burst as well in PvP. Now, as far as Prio goes for this item, I could see a lot of hardcore guilds kind of dividing the trinkets up. So because rogues get pretty good benefit from Slayer's Crest as well, I could see hardcore guilds giving Slayer's Crest to rogues first, and then giving the Kiss of the Spider to warriors first. But again, if you're not in a super hardcore guild where every player is performing really, really well, I would probably look at a more individual performance-based allocation there, right? If a rogue is performing way better than a warrior, you wouldn't just say, well, sorry, that guy's a warrior, he gets the Kiss of the Spider, even though you perform way, way better than he does on all the raids. So I think it's going to be coming down to performance-based in the less hardcore guilds, but I could absolutely see in a more hardcore setting where rogues end up taking Slayer's Crest and warriors end up taking Kiss of the Spider. Or if you just like PvP as well, I could see, like myself, I'm considering just going for Slayer's Crest before Kiss of the Spider anyway, just because I think it's I prefer it for PvP. And again, the damage difference isn't that crazy. It's 23 DPS gain here in a 90-second fight versus Earthstrike, versus a 30 DPS gain in a 90-second fight. So it's not a crazy difference there. Now, let's talk about Mark of the Champion. Mark of the Champion's basically a free trinket. You get it from the quest once you kill KT, and everyone's going to get this. So it gives 150 attack power versus undead and demons, which is really, really good because a lot of Naxxramas is undead. So this is an amazing trinket. So you can see in a DPS gain versus Earthstrike in a 90-second fight, this is actually plus 25 to 30 DPS. So in a lot of situations, this Mark of the Champion trinket is actually as good as like a Slayer's Crest or Kiss of the Spider. It's a really, really, really good trinket. So most people are going to be using this as the passive trinket in Naxxramas, and it's free, so why not? And in particular, you actually see this trinket outperform Slayer's Crest and Kiss of the Spider when you get around that 90-second plus mark. So around that 90-second plus mark, when I was looking at the sims, is roughly when Mark of the Champion really starts to come into its own. Just be aware that when we're comparing this Mark of the Champion to active trinkets, some fights might go long enough that you actually get 2 usages. So if the fight goes for more than 2 minutes, you might actually cross over again and be able to use your active trinket a second time. And that's where it kind of starts to pull towards these active trinkets more instead of this passive trinket. But again, you guys are not going to be getting Slayer's Crest and Kiss of the Spider both at the same time early on in the phase. It's not going to happen unless you guys have corrupt loot councils or something that are funneling you loot. So most cases you'll probably be using like a Kiss of the Spider and Slayer's Crest with a Mark of the Champion or something like that. So you're not going to have both Slayer's Crest and Kiss of the Spider. Okay, now I will cover more trinket combinations later on in the guide because there are some other interesting combinations of trinkets that you can go for Naxxramas. But for now, let's continue with the non-tier items in Naxxramas. So for Dagger's Kingsfall, massive, massive upgrade. I mean, this is a no-brainer. You can see here, if you have a Death Sting Pugio and you swap out your Pugio and move your Death Sting to offhand, it's a 40 to 45 DPS upgrade to take up a Kingsfall. And if you have a Pugio, for example, so if you have a Pugio, you were unlucky, you didn't get your Death Sting, you're a Dagger rogue without a Death Sting, and you have a Pugio in your main hand, this is going to be a 60 DPS increase. So this Kingsfall is the best item you're going to pick up as a Dagger rogue. And next we have the Fang, so Maexxna's Fang, is that how you say her name? But it's still a pretty good item, but it's a temporary pickup obviously. So obviously this is more if you are running Pugio in your offhand still. But this is more of a temporary pickup. So this is really good for those of you still using double Pugio, for example. You can pick this up and it is an 18 to 25 DPS increase to swap out your Pugio in your main hand. You can see if you have a Pugio offhand, you swap out the Pugio for the Fang. It's only a 3 or 4 DPS increase, so not super worth that. But if you're using a rank 14 offhand, so you're still using the rank 14 offhand Dagger, it's actually not bad, 10 to 15 DPS increase there. So yeah, this is basically going to be for people who are using double Pugio still. Now the Harbinger of Doom, so this is a trash drop actually, but it's a pretty nice item. So again, this is kind of a temporary upgrade. So for people who are waiting for the Kingsfall and Death Sting, this kind of works in to swap over for your Pugio. So if you swap it for a Pugio main hand, it's 13 DPS increase. If you swap it for a Pugio offhand, it's a 9 to 10-ish DPS increase. If you swap it for a rank 14 offhand, it's actually a 19 to 20 DPS increase. So this is a really nice weapon because it drops off trash, and trash is farmable. So you can join a trash farm group. I have heard rumors that mages can apparently solo the trash on PTR as well. So you might be able to pay a mage to just buy one of these off them. So this is a really nice drop for just a trash drop that you can get for free. Next we have swords. So Gressil, this is massive. I mean, this is like the Kingsfall, except this is for sword rogues. This is a no-brainer. 50 to 60 DPS increase versus AQR. Massive. Maybe I think it might be the biggest DPS increase for sword rogue from a single item in the game. It's a massive DPS increase. And if you have a rank 14 main hand, this is a 40 to 45 DPS increase. So yeah, this is just a really amazing sword that every rogue is going to want if you are sword rogue. The Hungering Cold. This is going to be a controversial item. This is going to be maybe the most contested weapon in Phase 6. So every non-human rogue wants the Hungering Cold, and every warrior also wants the Hungering Cold. It's a massive DPS increase versus a Maladef, so 45 to 50 DPS increase versus a Maladef offhand for non-humans. And if you have a rank 14 offhand as well, it's a 50 to 55 DPS increase as well. So this is a massive upgrade, but the problem is every warrior wants this sword as well. So good luck, sword rogues. You're going to be fighting for this. It's going to be a super hard item to get. I think unless your guild gets lucky, not everyone's going to be picking this up. I think it's the most contested weapon out of all the melee weapons in Phase 6. Now, next we have the Iblis. So Iblis is it Iblis? Am I saying it right? But either way, this is a great weapon for humans. So this is the best human offhand sword. So you can see here, DPS gain versus a CTS offhand is 35 DPS. Versus an AQR offhand for humans, it's 38 DPS increase. It's not great for Thunder Fury, so only Thunder Fury offhand human rogues. You're not going to see a big DPS increase here, so you guys would probably not really highly prio an Iblis if you have a Thunder Fury offhand already. But for basically everyone else, every other human rogue, this is quite a really nice upgrade. And the interesting thing is, even for non-humans, it's actually a pretty nice upgrade. Now, obviously, you're not going to prio this to non-humans. The human rogues are going to be prio this first over non-human sword rogues. But it is still a nice upgrade. So even if you swap a Maladef out for the Iblis, it's a 14 to 15 DPS increase. If you swap out a rank 14 offhand, it's an 18 to 22 DPS increase. So even for non-humans, this is actually not a bad item. Now let's talk about the claw. This is an interesting one. This is really interesting one. This claw is actually amazing. Look at these stats. Look at these stats. It's actually an amazing PvP item if you look at it. For Hemo rogues, this is an amazing item for PvP. So the DPS gain for non-humans is pretty minimal if you have a Maladef offhand already. But if you're a non-human and you're still using a Warblade of the Hakari, so maybe you just never upgraded your offhand, you couldn't get a Maladef, this is huge. It's plus 35 DPS, and it's not going to be highly wanted by people for PvE. It's not going to be super contested, so this could be a really nice temporary pickup for you. Or if you're a PvPer and you focus on PvP, this could be a really nice pickup while giving you a PvE boost as well. Now for humans, it's actually not bad either. So you can see here, if you are still using a Warblade of the Hakari offhand right now, it's a 19 DPS increase for your offhand. If you're losing a Raven Crest Legacy, which a lot of human rogues are using, it's 10 to 11 DPS increase as well. CTS in offhand, it's still a 9 to 10 DPS increase. It's only a DPS loss if you have a rank 14 sword offhand there for humans. So coming into the phase, this is actually a really nice temporary / PvP weapon pickup. It's actually a really nice weapon. Let's talk about the maces. This is another interesting one. So Misplaced Servo Arm. This is a trash drop. You can trash farm this. You can join a trash group and just farm these Servo Arms. And for non-humans, it's pretty bad. Honestly, versus an AQR, it's 30 to 35 DPS loss versus an AQR main hand and Maladef offhand. So let's say you get 2 of these Servo Arms and you swap out both of your swords and go Mace spec. It's a 30 to 35 DPS loss. So if you're coming into the phase as a non-human with good swords, it's not good. Basically, you don't want this. It's a cool PvP item, but not for PvE. Now for humans is where it gets kind of interesting. So DPS loss just 1-to-1 with an AQR is not great. It's minus 25 to 30 DPS loss for a human. But here's the interesting thing is if you swap out both your AQR main hand and Ravencrest offhand, so let's say you go into phase 6 as a human rogue with AQR main hand, Ravencrest offhand, and you get 2 of these manual servo arms, or misplaced servo arms rather, it is only a 15 DPS loss. So what this means is that if you are a brand new human rogue in phase 6, you could actually go farm 2 of these trash drops and be not far behind someone that came into phase 6 with an AQR and Ravencrest offhand. So it could be a really nice catch-up option for human sword rogues who will just run Mace spec instead and get really close to that AQR and Ravencrest combo set. That, and it's also really fun in PvP. This is an amazing Hemo PvP spec item. Now, this is kind of goes hand in hand with the second mace, the Castigator. Now, I'm not 100% sure how much warriors want this. They may actually kind of want this mace on Alan's side because of the human ratio. But if you pair up this Misplaced Servo arm with the Castigator in the offhand, and your human is actually insanely close. So now we're getting to a point where it's minus 4 to 5 DPS versus an AQR main hand and Ravencrest offhand. So you could come in and pick up a Misplaced Servo arm and Castigator, and that's almost the same as having an AQR main hand and Ravencrest offhand for human rogues in particular, just because of the human ratio. Now for non-humans, it's a little bit further behind, but I could see a lot of people picking up servo arms for just catch-up gear if you're a human rogue. Same with the Castigator, assuming warriors don't want this. I'm not 100% sure how much warriors do or don't want this on Alan's side. But even if they do want this, you can always just pick up 2 Misplaced Servo arms, which again, only 15 DPS behind an AQR and Ravencrest if you're a human rogue. Now let's talk range item. So again, we covered this briefly earlier, but the Nerubian Slavemaker, all the hunters actually want this, so you're not going to be able to take this over hunters, considering what a small DPS increase it is, especially considering the fact that most rogues won't even want this. And as we covered before, this is 1-to-1 a DPS increase over Striker's Mark, 3 to 5 DPS, a 2 to 3 DPS over Larvae of the Great Worm, 3 to 5 DPS over a crossbow of Imminent Doom, so that's the AQ20 crossbow. But this has issues with crit cap. So because all Dagger rogues struggle with crit cap in phase 6, you guys won't want to pick this up. A Striker's Mark is way better. If you have a Striker's Mark, that's ideal as a Dagger rogue in phase 6. You won't actually want to pick this up because of crit cap issues. And even buffed Alliance rogues, so even if you're buffed Alliance sword rogue, you might actually prefer the Striker's Mark, because buffed Alliance sword rogues do have to do a 1-item swap to avoid crit cap, and this is one of the better items to swap out. So yeah, not gonna be an item that a lot of people actually want, and on top of that, it's really contested because all the hunters want it first anyway. So I would honestly, I'm just giving this a miss. I'm not picking this up at all because I play daggers anyway, and I cannot pick this up without crit capping. Okay, next we have the Soul String. So this is basically just another possible range item for people that don't have a raid level range item yet. So this is basically on par with a Striker's Mark, a Larvae of the Great Worm, and a crossbow of Imminent Doom. So it's within basically 1 DPS of them. It's a pretty decent weapon, but again, it is crit based. So I think Striker's Mark is actually low-key the best range item still, even though these other items 1-to-1 right now are comparable DPS, just because of crit cap issues. Because of these crit cap issues, I think Striker's Mark value is actually going up. Okay, now before we go to the full base list and I tell you all the pieces you're going to put together and what you're actually going to swap out to stay below the crit cap, here's basically what I'm going to prio. This is personally what I think are the best priors for phase 6 rogues. So firstly, it is weapons. So this is obvious. Every single phase, weapons are almost always the biggest upgrades. So you're going to want to prio your Gressil, your Iblis, your Hungering Cold, your Kingsfalls. Basically, prio your weapons first. And again, the Hungering Cold is going to be super hard to get. I think it's going to be the most contested melee weapon, because every single warrior wants the Hungering Cold practically. So yeah, if you want a Hungering Cold, be prepared to fight the warriors for it. Now, number 2 prios is going to be Kiss of the Spider or Slayer's Crest. So you need to get one of these 2 trinkets, or you should want to get one of these 2 trinkets, or both. You know, if you're a bowler and you think you can get both, then go for it. But you should try to get one of these 2 trinkets. As I explained earlier, Kiss of the Spider is super contested with the warriors, so that's going to depend on your guild, how possible it is to get that. But you do want to prio one of these 2 trinkets. Again, if you got the Jom Gabar in phase 5, it may be a little bit hard to convince people to give you one of these trinkets because Jom Gabar is almost at the level of a Kiss of the Spider and Slayer's Crest. Not quite, but it's close enough that some people might look at you funny if you have a Jom Gabar and you're still going for these. So it's going to depend on how your guild is doing your loot priors, but you want to try to get the Kiss of the Spider or the Slayer's Crest, or both. So number 3, Band of Unnatural Forces. Really, really great item. Great ring. One of the biggest DPS increases outside of weapons and trinkets. So yeah, it's just a really, really good item. Now number 4, I'm actually going to shift things up here and say you should go for a Bonescythe ring after those items, because while it's not the biggest DPS upgrade or the best piece of Bonescythe, it's the rarest piece. So if you're going to play the odds and go for the rarest piece of Bonescythe first, just in case your guild gets bad RNG and you don't get enough pieces of the Bonescythe, this is technically going to be the rarest piece. Because KT drops 2 random rings and there's 1 for each class, meaning 8 types of rings can drop. Whereas for all the other tier 3 pieces, there's only 3 possible token types. So technically these rings are the rarest piece of Bonescythe, and that's why I prior them first out of all the tier 3 pieces. And then lastly, I just prior the other tier 3 pieces. So this is your helmet, shoulders, and legs are going to be your biggest DPS increase here. So helmet, shoulders, and legs are going to be the biggest Bonescythe tier 3 pieces, and then after that I would look at other pieces. But again, it's not 100% drop rate for the warrior and rogue tokens, so you may be at the mercy of RNG here as to which Bonescythe pieces you get. Overall, I don't think it's actually a big deal how you prior your tier 3, because chances are most of you guys should end up with a full set, assuming your guild continues to clear phase 6 on lockout. Okay, now let's go over the BIS list now that you guys understand how the gearing works. So there's actually different BIS lists for whether you're Alliance, whether you're Horde, whether you're Daggers, or whether you're Swords. So because of how the buffs work out and how the gearing works out for the crit cap issues, it changes based on your faction and your spec. Okay, so firstly, Alliance Dagger Rogues. So you guys aren't actually even going to run 8 out of 9 Bonescythe. You're not even gonna be using your 8-piece Bonescythe set bonus once you get into full BIS. So you guys are gonna run Bonescythe helmet, necklace is your prestos still, so you don't have to do anything there. You got your Bonescythe shoulders. You're actually going to be wanting to run your Cloak of Concentrated Hatred because it's going to help you stay below crit cap. So even though your Alliance and Cloak of the Fallen God is actually technically better DPS, if you can, you should want a Cloak of Concentrated Hatred here to try to get below crit cap, basically. Next, you're going to run the Bonescythe Breastplate here. And for your wrist, you're actually going to want to swap out, probably, your wrist for the QEBs. So you're going to swap out your Bonescythe braces. This is going to lose you your chance at getting 8-piece, but it's worth it because otherwise you're going to crit cap. So this is if you're in full BIS. So this is if you have every single BIS item in a game. You're going to be wanting to swap out that QEB, swap into that QEB instead of Bonescythe braces to try to get your crit cap lower when you're in full world buffs. Now for your hands, obviously if you don't have Death Sting yet, you need to use ACLGs, but hopefully you have a Death Sting sometime and you can just wear Bonescythe gauntlets. For your main hand and offhand, that's obvious. Kingsfall, main hand, Death Stings offhand, that's fine. For your range, you're going to want to go Striker's Mark over the Nerubian option because the Nerubian is crit and you can't spare. Alliance Dagger Rogues are the most crit capped out of all the rogues in phase 6. So because of the ZG and Paladin buff and being Dagger Rogue with 5% more crit from your spec, you just have major issues with crit cap. Now for trinkets, you have a whole bunch of trinkets. I'm going to do a whole trinket section towards the end of this. So we're going to cover trinkets after we cover this BIS list here because It's situational. It's situational. So that's why there's so many different trinkets here. But I'll explain these trinkets in a second. Now for your fingers, we have Bonescythe Ring and Band of Unnatural Forces. For your feet, you have Bonescythe Sabatons. For your legs, Bonescythe Leg Plates. And for your waist, because you do want to watch for your crit cap, we're going to go with the Cthulhu Belt to lower the amount of crit that you do have. So yeah, this is basically the options you're going to go for. So again, the 3 less than BIS options you're going to swap in are Striker's Mark, QEB, and Cloak of Concentrated Hatred. Because if you are in full BIS, this is only if you're in absolute full BIS, you need to swap in those 3 items because that's going to keep you below the crit cap when you're world buffed. So again, all my sims are with world buffs, so I assume that you're going in for the min-max play with full world buffs when we're talking about this BIS list. Now, Horde Dagger Rogues. Horde Dagger Rogues are also running into major crit cap issues. Now, thankfully, a little bit less crit cap issues though than our Alliance counterparts. So you're going to be wearing all the same gear that we just went through. So Bonescythe Helmet, Prestos, Shoulders, Bonescythe as well. Cloak of Concentrated Hatred is still the best option here to avoid crit cap. Bonescythe Breastplate. Now the difference here is you won't have to swap in the QEBs. You have a little bit more wiggle room, so you can actually wear the Bonescythe Braces if you're not crit capped. Now Bonescythe Gauntlets, again the same, if you don't have Death Sting you need to wear ACLGs. Obvious Kingsfall, Death Sting here for your main hand, offhand. Range weapon, again, Dagger Rogues, basically you don't get to swap in the Nerubian Slavemaker at all, even if you get it, because you need the 1% hit on the Striker's Mark to avoid crit cap. Trinkets we will cover later, and Bonescythe Ring, Band of Unnatural Forces for your fingers, Bonescythe Feet, Bonescythe Legs, and Belt is the Belt of Never Ending Agony, which is the best option for Horde Rogues in general. Again, for your avoiding crit cap, the 3 less than BIS options you're going to swap in over the actual BIS options are the Cloak of Concentrated Hatred, the Bonescythe Braces, and the Striker's Mark out of your options here. So the difference between the Alliance Rogues is that you actually do get to wear your Bonescythe Braces in a full BIS scenario with World Bust because you have a little bit less crit than the Alliance Rogues, thankfully. So you don't have to swap in the QEBs. Okay, now Alliance Sword Rogue BIS. So unlike the Dagger Rogues, Sword Rogues don't have as many crit cap issues. You will start towards the end of your BIS gearing, run into a little bit of crit cap issues with World Bust, but it's not so bad. You really only need one swap, one good swap in full BIS to avoid crit cap issues with World Buffs. So you're going to be running Bonescythe Helmet, Prestos, Bonescythe Shoulders. Now here you're actually going to choose to run Cloak of the Fallen God, because this is the better option. It's actually BIS, it beats out Shrouded Dominion as we mentioned earlier for Alliance Rogues. You're going to be wanting to run Death Dealer's Vest. So again, 2.5 chest is actually better than tier 3 chest for Alliance side, 1-to-1. You're going to run Bonescythe Braces, Bonescythe Gauntlets. For main hand offhand, you're going to get the Gressil and Hungering Cold if you're non-human, or the Gressil and Iblis if you are human. Range, you're actually going to want a Striker's Mark if you want to avoid crit cap. For trinkets, it's all the same trinkets again, which we'll cover in a second. Fingers is the same, Bonescythe Ring, Band of Unnatural Forces, Bonescythe Feet, Bonescythe Legs, Bonescythe Waist Guards. So you're basically running 8 out of 9 Bonescythe here, but with the chest swapped out for 2.5. Now as far as the swap out options for avoiding your crit cap, in full BIS, you're going to be swapping in Cloak of the Fallen God and Striker's Mark out of the options. So out of all the back options, you're going to want Cloak of the Fallen God and Striker's Mark if you're on absolute full BIS here. And this option is going to get you basically just below or at the crit cap. Now another variation you can actually do, but in my sims this actually came out just barely below, is you can actually swap out Striker's Mark for Nerubian, but then you swap out Cloak of the Fallen God for the Cloak of Concentrated Hatred instead, which has 1% hit. So that's another variation you can do. But yeah, so basically you need to make one main swap as a Alliance Sword Rogue with full World Bust to avoid crit capping. Now let's talk Horde Sword Rogues, Phase 6 BIS. So Horde Sword Rogues have it easy. you can see here, there's not many variations that are listed here because you can just go for the full bis option and not run into any crit cap issues. So Horde Sword Rogues, because you have a little bit less crit than Alliance Sword Rogues due to not having Paladin buff stacking, you actually don't have any crit cap issues for the most part. Now this doesn't mean that you can't or that you will never crit cap. Maybe if your gearing path is a little bit random, you just happen to swap out certain hit pieces early, you might get crit capped along the way. But once you reach full bis, you're basically not running into any crit cap options. So full Bonescythe here, your other options here will be Prestas. Your back will actually be the Shroud of Dominion, which no one else really gets to wear. You're the lucky ones, the Horde Sword Rogues. Your weapons are going to be Gressil and Hungering Cold. I don't really know why I put Iblis here, but technically you could use Iblis for the lower level NPCs. So if you're not versing a level 63 mob, so if you're versing just a level 60 mob like Trash, technically Iblis would be just as good as a Hungering Cold in that scenario where you don't need the weapon skill. For your range, you're going to go Nerubian Slavemaker, but again, hunters are all going to want this first, so good luck picking this up. It's going to take a while. But again, no one else wants it anyway, so maybe it'll be okay if you don't have a lot of hunters. Trinkets, we're going to cover all the trinket stuff in a second. Fingers, Bonescythe Ring, Band of Unnatural Forces, and as I said before, you're running full Bonescythe here for everything else. Okay, now let's talk about trinket combinations, because this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So there's a whole bunch of trinket combinations, but the one constant is that usually you're always going to want a Slayer's Crest or a Kiss of the Spider in one of the trinket slots. It's just a really good active trinket that is the standard way to go in one slot. So you're almost always using at least one really good active trinket, which is the Slayer's Crest or Kiss of the Spider. Alright, so again, please do take these recommendations as a general guide for trinket stuff, because there's so many variations that can change based on the boss fight, the length of the fight, the type of fight, like the type of mob that the boss is, how much armor he has. So there's a lot of factors here, and we're going to try to cover the most common ones. So versus undead mobs, this is going to be kind of your general usage. Is you're going to want to use a Slayer's Crest and Kiss of the Spider, or Kiss of the Spider, so one of these two really good active trinkets with the Mark of the Champion. So if the mob is undead, you should use this for most fights. It's just a very good general use scenario. Mark of the Champion is really amazing versus anything undead. Now, if the mob isn't undead, you're going to go with the good old-fashioned one active trinket with the DFT. So a lot of people are doing this already with Earthstrike DFT. This is just the upgraded version, so you're going to want a Slayer's Crest or Kiss of the Spider with a DFT. So this is just a standard staple, and it's still a really good option. DFT is still your best passive trinket for non-undead mobs. Now, in really high armor boss scenarios, so let's say the boss has high armor, or it's a trash fight, or you're not running exposed armor and it's a quick sub 1 minute fight, you can actually look to use Slayer's Crest or Kiss of the Spider with a Badge of the Swarm Guard. And Badge of the Swarm Guard does not share a cooldown with any other of the active trinkets really, so you can pop both Badge of the Swarm Guard and Slayer's Crest Kiss of the Spider at the same time and stack the effects up right there. So Badge is actually an amazing trinket if the fight is, say, sub 1 minute, your guild isn't running exposed armor. You can actually even use this on normal boss fights, and it can actually be on par with like a Slayer's Crest or Kiss of the Spider in that scenario. So sub 1 minute and no exposed armor is where Badge of the Swarm Guard starts to really shine. And as well as that, there are some mobs like, for example, Twin Amps right now in AQ that just have more armor naturally. So you can use Badge on those as well, and it performs very well. Now, let's talk about the versus everything scenario. So this is the baller combo, the Kiss of the Spider and Slayer's Crest. Outside of a fight that is so short that you can't use both trinkets effectively, so because it's just 20-second cooldown once you use one of these trinkets before you can use the other one, this is just your BIS combo for the majority of stuff. This is just really, it performs strong on everything, but you're very unlikely to ever pick up both Slayer's Crest and Kiss of the Spider, so I wouldn't count on getting this particular combination. Now, special mention to Renataki's trinket. So this is still an okay trinket in niche scenarios. So if this is a cleave fight, so in a cleave scenario or an extremely short fight, we're talking sub 25 seconds maybe, where you're using double trinket, this can actually come into handy. Or actually even like a super short fight if it's a 15-second or 10-second fight. I don't know what fights are that quick, but Renataki still has a case. It's still good in a cleave scenario, and in an extremely short fight, let's say sub 25 seconds, it might have a usage here. And on top of that, it's still a great trash trinket. So because you can just pop it and get all the energy usage out of it immediately on trash, it's still actually a really good trash trinket if you need a good trash trinket. Alright, so that was our phase 6 loot prior guide. We covered a lot. This was a super long guide, and I hope it answered all your questions. Again, this guide took me the better part of a week of non-stop sims and collecting and referencing all the different information. So if you're not subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you can subscribe. And as always, if you like this sort of content, you want to come say hi, you want to help support me, you can check out twitch.tv/snowme. You can come say hi on my stream. So if you want to come help support it, come say hi at twitch.tv/snowme. Alright, take care, and I will catch you guys in the next video.